Bueno, ahora que me cierren la puerta ya. Pues buenas tardes a todos, es un placer.
Well, good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here at a GFN with a small Spanish edition. It's a pleasure to talk in our own language. And for me, it's a pleasure to have doctors such as the ones we have up here who are doing such a good job in harm reduction in Spain and in Latin America. The panel will talk about if a doctor actually has a moral obligation to work against harm reduction, to work for harm reduction, sorry. I've worked with this for 10 years, and doctors sometimes come up to me and say they support me. Why are they scared to publicly support harm reduction? We'll start with some small questions, and then we'll have an interesting debate. First of all, I'll present Dr. Terán, speaker from the Quito University. Why are there not more doctors in Ecuador defending harm reduction, tobacco harm reduction? Thank you to the organizers for giving us this opportunity to talk about this issue. And I think this is something that affects us, the whole region. First of all, there's not adequate preparation regarding tactics. Harm done by tobacco. There aren't enough tools. It's not talked about enough. The topic isn't even discussed in universities, and it's seen as negative to even. Secondly, social pressure. Unfortunately, if you publicly want to defend the topic of harm reduction, you're immediately stigmatized, you're attacked, you're pointed at. And that means that most professionals, even if they might be in favor of this movement, they decide not to. Especially if their work atmosphere opposes it, because of the pressure of the public system. It ensures that this happens and that people don't support it. Well, yeah, sometimes I manage to get doctors to support this. It tends to be doctors that have nothing to lose. Doctors are older, that no one can remove them from their positions. But when you have a young doctor that wants to say this, they're terrorized, they're afraid. They're afraid of losing their job, they're afraid of not getting promotions, etc. And it's a shame. I'm going to ask Fernando the same question. Fernando's from Spain. Why are there not more doctors that defend tobacco harm reduction? Spain, there are two fundamental reasons. First one is that government institutions don't promote it. There is harm reduction in other aspects, such as cars, such as food, and pharmaceutical products regarding drug addiction. It exists except for everything such as tobacco. If the government, especially sanitary sections, don't promote this, it means that people express their opinion. It's a scientific opinion. It's based on something. It's not opinions. When we decide to support initiatives in favor of harm reduction regarding tobacco, it's because we see there are errors and there are problems that aren't fixed. In Spain, we have a large percentage of the population that still smokes, despite the projects that have been presented throughout time and projects that have had good results. But those measures aren't reaching the population. That's why we don't reach numbers that countries such as Sweden and the United Kingdom have, which we talked about a lot. If we don't reach those measures, what we'll have to do is look at other methods of reaching it. We can't stay in that same speech. When us doctors talk in favor of this and promote it so that other colleagues have enough information to make their own decisions, which is something you don't learn at university. And you want to form people and inform people with information, with comparing different information. And I'm sure I have mistakes while I expose my information. I would need someone that doesn't have my same opinion to look at it. Because working together, we might reach an agreement. But if the government doesn't promote it, and it marks like what happens in Spain, a democratic country in Europe, the health ministry has closed the summit that we did in Spain, not only of national figures, but it was an international summit, which wasn't going to be celebrated in a back room of my home. It was going to be done in a public university, which is where science is to be debated. But when the government tries to silence you, it'll be really easy to say that I'm not right, but we should be discussing things. What they do is they silence you, silence the voices that don't follow the official speech. What happens to most of us is that they don't want problems. My position enables me to not be afraid of being attacked. But I have colleagues that work in the private sector who say that they can't help. And I'll end up losing my job, and that's a huge problem. Yes, unfortunately, this is truth. This is true. There are many cases. Mine is a specific contract. And it shows that even important people can be silenced. There are doctors that have been kicked out of universities for investigating harm reduction. So they decide not to get involved ever again. And we're not talking about young people. There's important doctors whose projects are taken away from them. They're silenced, they don't enable them to talk. It's incredible. This is science. What's the problem with? But they react with violence. At the end of the day, it's violence. When facing this violence, I'm going to start with you, Silvia. How do you doctors? Silvia is a toxicologist from Brazil. How do you overcome these attempts at discrediting you? Has this happened to you? How do you manage it? Well, first of all, I would like to say hi to everyone that's here, everyone that's here participating in this debate, and especially Carmen, who invited me and gave me the chance to talk in Portuguese, Spanish to all of you. To start with, I'm a toxicologist, and I work and I study harm reduction 30 years. As the Dr. Fernando said, I started working with harm reduction with illegal drugs. So my focus was crack, cocaine, I don't know what they're called in Spanish, but in Brazil we call them las aprofume, which are volatile smells. This has been my life, studying the way of reducing damage to people who depend on certain products that couldn't stop or didn't want to stop. But we were talking about illegal substances. And we started talking about harm reduction of tobacco. The same thing happened. There's always been an answer to say that harm reduction in conservative countries is seen as promoting the consumption of these products, and it's not true. People think harm reduction can't be done with tobacco. That's what they think. So it's a tough problem to overcome. As a toxicologist myself, and talk about the scientific side, and talk about what substances do to the body, I started to talk about what I thought was important. There's a need to reduce the effects that a product has on a person who doesn't want to stop, or the person that can't stop using it. So once we started talking about all this, and due to my history of toxicology, they started calling me. To provide speeches regarding these issues. I led a group from Brazil in this, and that's why my name was put on a blacklist of people that the tobacco companies oppose and pay attention to, and that upset me, because I've always tried to show that I was talking from the toxicology point of view, how a substance acts on the body. And splitting the damage done by different products and different components that can cause cancer. So my name, I went onto this blacklist along with other people, and we had to move a lot of stones and prove that what my point of view has been for 30 years. Harm reduction is often talked in general. And we've always had this issue of people thinking we're promoting these substances. We had a colleague in the Sao Paulo University had a very interesting product regarding ecstasy. And she talked about damage reduction in parties. Her financing was removed. She had government financing. and she never managed to keep going with this project. So yeah, I think we have to talk more. We have to inform people more about what harm reduction is and break that concept that we're promoting the use. No, it's just a guarantee that the person can use and have the lowest damage possible. Yeah, I completely agree. And I'd love to know under what authority you have to prove to someone that you're not told what to do. You have to prove that the industry hasn't paid you, because if not, they'll destroy your career. It's terrifying. Fine. And I'll ask the same question to Roberto. Roberto doesn't need a presentation. Thank you, Carmen. Same question to you. Well, I'm not a doctor. Although I'm proud to say that despite being a doctor in physics, I once gave birth to a child. But I have a lot of experience with doctors as a patient, which is important. Typically in questionnaires, I say that I don't smoke, and that's it. But when I had cancer, which I had quite a few times, you have a closer relationship with doctors, not only with oncologists, but with surgeons, ophthalmologists, all type of doctors. And yeah, I tell them that I use e-cigarettes. I don't hide that from them. And interestingly enough, either the Gorbachev in closet effect. That is so many years ago, Gorbachev was there without saying anything until the right moment arrived. And I feel there's a lot of closet Gorbachevs. I'm not going to say my oncologist is delighted that I vape. He told me that it might not be good. And that might not be the best thing for me, but taking tobacco away is good, is what he said. He never said, no, we can't talk. He told me it wasn't good, but I could use it. And in general, that's the approach taken by doctors. One thing is what is private, and another thing is for them to express this. For example, I mentioned my works regarding the physics and chemistry of this, and I've shown my works. I wanted to be able to talk in the hospital, not about medicine itself, about how the products work. But you see through their body language that this terrorized the doctors. So what happens? I compare this misinformation with, as a physicist, with gas. There might have been an article published, and it's very small pills, molecules that are floating around. So misinformation isn't very quickly. No, they release information very slowly. It's like molecules in the air. It's medical societies a lot of times that promote this. In Mexico, the government is the biggest publiciter of the Bloomberg Group, and that's why they receive money. Do you imagine Joe Biden? Joe Biden probably hates vapors, but do you see him on public TV speaking to 20 million Americans saying that vaping kills? Do you see Joe Biden doing this? Well, Lopez Obrador has done it.
Todos los ministros de salud, todos ellos es el mismo discurso. Eso más la cacofonía del gas de la desinformación, pues eso genera un ambiente desfavorable.
All this generates a disfavorable environment for all. How can we break this? It's tough. We have to wait for Stalin to die and for Gorbachev to rise. Gorbachev is there. There's a need for regulation. And it doesn't mean that we're going to be quiet until Stalin dies. We have to keep working, keep working, keep working. And to end, I'm not a doctor. I'm a professor. I'm at the highest level possible. Academically, I'm at the highest level possible. And I have 30 years of experience. They're not going to pressure me. But what happens around me, not in medicine, is they put a ceiling on me. They don't ban my investment. They even look at it because it's disciplinary. But if at my university I want to access promoting my science, yeah, that's why they put a ceiling on me. Why? Because we don't want to provoke the government. That's what they tell me directly. I don't have Carmen's example. They can't take away a lab that I don't have. They can't take away my brain. But they put a ceiling on me. We have to reach the public. They're writers, they're poets, engineers. We have to reach them because they don't receive enough information. They read the New York Times. They spread lies. So it's important. So this is very important. And that's my experience. Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to add it. Yeah. Something we've talked about in the summit. In the first attack, which was a threat, a threatening letter. It was when all the anti-vaping groups agreed with editors, and they started to accuse the director of university, and that's when the university just pulled away our summit. They're afraid. The society itself isn't scared of harm reduction, but they're scared of being pointed at for talking about this, and that's a problem. In a democratic country, a public university isn't allowed to talk about science. This didn't even happen in Franco's era. To what point are we allowing tobacco control to control the academic lives of people? To what point are we allowing this? And around this control, we know that this affects the political vision. and the regulation regarding harm reduction. Now I'm going to present Randa, who's from Costa Rica. I'm going to ask you, how are politicians affected in your country, for example, with the vision that has been installed in society regarding harm reduction? Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the panel for an invitation and the organization and everyone else present. I've had the possibility of participating in two legislative for 4 or 5 years of HIV legislation, and I managed a lot of things, and this motivated me to get involved in this too, to legislate or regulate the product regulation legislation regarding tobacco and such products. In first place, the lack of information from the government is impressive. It's huge. All of our work is very small. It's like we're ants working. If we learn how to do this, we'll end up reaching the government and reaching our audience. In the last one we did, we had to work very hard for them to learn very basic concepts. It's what us doctors have done since we started working. Always do this with our patients. Everything we do is for harm reduction for them. It's just now taking this name that it previously didn't have. It would be very pretentious for us to say that we cure people. We would, and that's the concept. Another vision that we have is that from the start we're used to base our work on evidence-based medicine, and once you take scientific data to many directors, they start pulling away, despite 1 + 1 being 2. Sometimes it's tedious. You try to advance and they seem to not have understood. But yeah, I'm not that pessimistic. I'm optimistic.
Se oía como que sí sabía. Yo dije, como que sí
It seems that after a long time, people end up learning. They start understanding our concepts, but you have to know who to look for and keep insisting. That's my recommendation. Yeah, in fact, I know it's true that when you go closer, you get closer to a regulator or a legislator, in the back of their heads, they already have the newspaper headlines saying that this is worse than tobacco, because that's what they read. They don't have that much time to read everything. But on the other side, politicians receive pressure groups. And tobacco companies have been working with governments throughout the world for more than 30 years. I've been hearing tobacco control for a very long time too. And once you bring something that completely opposes what they say and completely opposes what the newspaper headlines say, the politicians will receive you with hesitation. And whenever a doctor apparently goes to talk to you and says something regarding this, they're immediately accused of being paid for to by tobacco companies. So they're immediately not listened to. It's something that's very different to change because of what you guys have said. Because it's tough to explain to a legislator to explain what an e-cigarette is. And because they've already been told to be against this before. I'll ask the same question to Dr. Diego Verrastro. You've been in a lot of conferences, you've talked to a lot of politicians. What's your experience? Well, thanks to the organization and to my colleagues. It's a David versus Goliath kind of fight. It's tough to make sure that politicians understand that this change in technology and science, they will have to change the way of thinking their politics surrounding this issue. So for them to understand this, they have to want to open their heads for us to explain, to be able to transmit how tobacco harm reduction works. They see other methods such as gums, and none of them have something similar to the active smoking, which is releasing a sort of vapor. So they think it's very similar to smoking, or it's the same as smoking. So it's hard to make them understand that it's not the same thing. This requires a lot of energy, it's tiring. And we participated with a lot of legislators that had been that had been taught these issues before, so it's hard to break that ice. So we often said that we're going to tell them the other side of this story, which coincidentally is a true story of this issue. But it's complicated. Beyond our expertise, which is the movement of money that is done through politicians. So because we're beyond evil, we're multimillionaires of Lamborghinis due to the tobacco companies, it's tough to get them to understand that legislating and regulating these products, such as the consumption of alcohol, was at one point regulated, or regulating driving, or regulating flying planes. Yeah, these products have to be regulated too. It's a tough ask because I try to show politicians they might not make money, but this will last forever. This will create change throughout humanity. And as doctors, we're in an era of change where we're creating history. When we study medicine, we study Fleming with penicillin and other pressors. Well, the future will look at us in that way because we're making history. We're promoting this because we're doctors, because we want to save lives, because we don't want to damage people. And sometimes politicians struggle to understand this. Well, I completely agree. And talking about medicine and doctors. Well, we're not all doctors here, but almost. As doctors, what consequences does denying tobacco harm reduction? First of all, with patients and consumers. When consumers, when patients say that vaping is worse than tobacco, how do you deal with all this? I'll start. When you guys were talking, I was thinking that every time harm reduction is talked about, it's talked about in relationship with illegal substances. For more than 30 years, we have a fight against drugs, and the result is there for everyone to see it. It hasn't worked. And if we keep doing the same thing, we won't control anything at all. Well, what relationship does this have with e-cigarettes and electronic devices? In Brazil, they've been banned since 2009, and yet they're still used, and they're not properly used. We don't know the quality, where it comes from, where they go, who uses it, who doesn't, what it can be used for, where to buy it, but people still use it. So I think not regulating it, not talking about this. This will delay everything further. It will damage people. It will damage the population. From my point of view, I think we have to regulate, not ban. When you ban things, there are more illegal products that arise, and they'll still be used by people illegally. So I think proper regulation and not prohibition. Just like I say for any other substances, I think they should all be controlled, not banned. In the previous table, they talked slightly about this. I was hearing it. And that idea came to my mind. And they were talking about how substances can be used throughout medicine. And I remember that after many years from it being banned, they started studying the medicinal use of LSD, which are drugs which are seen as super bad, which even cause a dependency. The compulsive use of it doesn't even exist. So yeah, prohibition damages science. That's what I'd like to say. Well, when we're with patients, it's frustrating on some occasions. Because it's easy to say, oh, they should stop smoking. But only 2 to 5% of people manage to quit immediately. So let's use pharmaceuticals. We discard the problem that arise from champies. So let's move on to another product. But I have patients that I can't provide it to. I have pregnant people. What can I do with all this? What do I do with consumers? Let's open another door. If there are countries that using this door have managed to have the lowest tobacco rates in the whole world, I'm not talking about Europe, I'm talking about the world. Let's look at Sweden. Are they fools? Are they wrong? No. If their politics works and I don't apply it, which I could apply in different ways, I'm saying that their decisions are wrong, am I? Has tobaccoism been reduced, but cancer isn't? No, they have the lowest cancer rates too. there for. And they've been using it since 1970, which shows that e-cigarettes don't only have 20 years of life, so we don't have to wait another 20 years. Because sometimes, yeah, the effects of smoking aren't shown for a lot of years. Well, they've had it since 1970, and we can't see this, so it's frustrating. So yes, doctors are obliged to reduce harm. We do this with everything. Any operation, you're told, for example, not to eat this. We should inform people. And we should promote that the World Health Organization talks about this, because they talk about harm reduction in everything but tobacco. Institutions should, and that we don't want an economic benefit, we want health benefit. And even despite this, some patients will be able to say that they still want to smoke cigarettes, and we might have to look at even more options for them to quit it. But we have to try. And clearly, my patients don't say this when they see me, because I vape while I attend them. Not long ago, looking at some works done on nicotine, I was surprised with most of them, because most of the studies done regarding nicotine were related to combustion, to consuming nicotine through combustion. So all these works will have to be revised and seen with nicotine without combustion. As Roberto said previously, the vaping issue is a tsunami that's coming. So it'll probably go against nicotine rather than the method itself. And nicotine replacement therapies in some countries can be used with users from 15 years of age. So the difference with a spray and gums that include nicotine compared to vaping is huge. There's a lack of intellectual honesty in all of this. Nicotine opens up a huge field, not only in the neurological side, with anxiety, as was mentioned before, but also has a disinflammatory effect. It's used to fight psoriasis, issues of neurological damage too, with sleep and sleep issues as well. If studies are done with studies separated from combustion, a lot of this could advance. And if my patients say that it's worse than smoking, well, a visit that should have lasted half an hour will last an hour and a half, and as I'll explain all of the things I know. Okay, let's keep advancing very quickly. Well, I think that taking apart the specific issue of the patient, let's talk about the population in general. We have to be objective regarding which methods can be installed. There's no doubt that harm reduction has advanced slightly, but we know the results that we could achieve. So we have to think about what else we can implement. So the message can't be changed or adapted. We've never said this is good or this is healthy. We don't defend something that doesn't exist. We say it's less damaging, it's less bad. And under that concept, they must understand the responsibility of the state, any state, to provide people the right to access that possibility, to avoid parallel markets, avoid contraband, which puts customers at risk even more. The consumption of products that haven't been tested. We have to insist with this. It's a double responsibility. What the state is doing and decision makers is to say that smoking conventional cigarettes is better than looking at other alternatives. We have to keep insisting that we have to debate this scientifically, academically, based on evidence, and evidence that has to be acquired. And information that's produced isn't even looked at with the proper analysis, which is a shame. I'm going to give a practical example to close this section. I insist that we have to form ourselves, educate all of the professionals that work in health. What happens if I give talks and then patient arrives, I'm a urologist, and a patient arrives saying that they have a lack of erections. Well, 8 out of 10 people, 8 out of 10 consumers may have that issue. So we ask them how much they smoke, how much they consume, and see what we're going to do. And they go to pharmacy and they say, well, that's worse than smoking. That happens to all of us doctors. There's people who are ignorant in this issues, and it throws all of our work to waste. We have to teach professionals, we have to teach people that are going to work alongside our patients to not throw all of our work to the trash. Some say that's really bad for you. Do they actually know this? We have to educate ourselves and educate everyone that's around us. Very good. We don't have that much time, but we'll still do it. Briefly. The debate of the century. The conflict of interests. Is it a lie? The conflicts of interest of tobacco harm reduction is a lie. Well, everyone has a conflict of interest. No one's pure. Air isn't pure. It doesn't exist. Well, neither does a person with no conflict of interest exist. The biggest problem with how it's handled is that it's not marked. Just like contamination, there's nowhere in the world but we set a standard, a certain level, that under that level we can say that there's no contamination. And this also applies for us. the way it's handled with tobacco control, the World Health Organization, all of this, all of organizations associated to Bloomberg, is they extend this. I've seen someone say that to assist to a certain event, you have to prove that no one of your family up to like 6 different levels come from where my predecessors come from, like 6 times back. Come on, it's ridiculous. It's important to request this. When they say conflicts of interest, well, define this conflict of interest. Where is it? And that's where they'll fall. I've been banned due to an apparent conflict of interest to participate in the Senate. Well, where's the evidence? Apparently, it's because I belong to a civil organization in Mexico that granted grants, and that's the evidence, apparently. But when they publicly express the evidence, I'll knock them out. Because they have to define conflicts of interest. When has anyone paid me? I can meet up with tobacco companies or go to a restaurant with them. It has nothing to do. Talking with legislators isn't a conflict of interest. They should define these conflicts of interest that they mention. And once it's defined, we should attack them. Because we have legal alternatives to demand them. We might lose, but it's a gas effect. We might lose our case, but there has been a case. But if we all do this, if we all request this, and once they define our conflicts of interest, and they define them properly, they have to prove that I've been paid that I've received payments from tobacco companies, and they can't prove it. Well, we have to take them to court. We have to do this. I completely agree with you. Someone has to do something, because it reaches a point where they're destroying people's lives, they're destroying careers, doctors, scientists, simply by creating a negative image and reducing their creditability. It's criminal what they're doing.
Claro, es que lo que no se debe es distorsionar la terminología. El conflicto de interés, como dice Roberto,
The conflict of interest, as Roberto mentioned, will always exist, but has to be declared. And that's where their evil arises. They pretend to hide something that doesn't exist. A couple of weeks ago, we were discussing the freedom that investigators have to report their results with a sponsor, and a conflict of interest issue arises. If I work for the US government, how free am I to express everything? If a tobacco company backs me, how free am I? And declaring sponsors freeze the communication of our results. Because if I freely say that I've been financed by such company or such group, I have the capacity of showing what I've found. Yet they use this information that you've been paid by X or by such group, and they say that you've used your preparation and you use your studies to show something in their favor, to give a false result. That's where you have to defend yourself. I'm not as radical as Roberto to take people to court. But I believe scientists should have that freedom. I've been invited to give conferences, and I'll just show what I've studied, show my studies. There's no point in hiding sponsors, but we should defend the fact that that doesn't show that our opinions are skewed.
Cuando una industria paga una investigación, tiene que estar dispuesta a que no le guste el resultado de esa investigación. No hay más.
Lo que pasa es que a veces con todo este tema hay una doble vara. O sea, los trabajos
There's a
científicos
double standard regarding this.
subvencionados por los anti,
There's some trash works
No, las farmas son seres de luz que nunca han matado.
which are backed by
con la medicina,
by the big pharma, and they're trash, and yet
un congreso más,
they're not accused of anything.
más antihipertensivos, no pondrían más prótesis de titanio, ni nada de todo eso.
They'd lose so much money, yet no one argues with them, with their conflict of interest. I found the conflict of interest once we started talking about tobacco harm reduction. It doesn't exist in surgeries.
Una laparotomía y la hizo por laparoscópica con instrumental de Stork, nadie le dice que tiene conflictos de interés.
No one argues with a surgeon because he worked with a certain brand.
Es un falso.
Es insane, es insane. En inglés sería, es
Insane.
insano poder pensar esto porque se dirige a un lado y no al otro. O sea, hay
Why it's aimed at us and not aimed at other sectors? It's intellectual dishonesty.
Eso lo podemos traslapar hasta las instituciones públicas. La persona que
This
va a
shows
decidir,
even in the public sector.
que va a decidir de eso,
The people who go to COP and make decisions
no va a poder dar
has a conflict of interest
llegar a contar algo que le van a decir que tiene que hacer.
because he'll be told what to do.
Sea un conflicto de intereses. O
That's a
vamos
conflict
ir
of
a una
interest.
a votación popular de todos los países a ver qué votamos entre todos. No.
Or will all
Y eso
countries
es un conflicto de
what they
intereses que nos
want?
afecta absolutamente a todos, ¿verdad?
And that conflict of interest affects all of us.
Me parece súper bien y te la voy a robar, Robert. Defíname qué es.
And I'm going to steal what Roberto said. Tell us what the conflict of interest is.
Una acetaminofén marca los patitos, ya me pueden acusar de conflicto de intereses. Y eso no
I'll be
es-
accused of conflict of interest for anything.
Yo tengo que llegar a trabajar todos los días a mi casa. A mí Pfizer no me paga nada.
Pfizer doesn't pay me anything.
A ver, el tema es. Voy a remarcar la idea que has dado, ¿no? Ahora se celebra.
I'm going to highlight what you said. COP10 will be celebrated
El
soon.
100% de organizaciones que van a entrar ahí están
All of the organizations that will
financiadas,
go there are
sí,
financed
no
either
tenemos
by
más
Bloomberg or
cosas
Big
ahí.
Pharma or
Eso
other
no se
sectors.
quiere, cambio
Is that not a conflict of interest?
reducción de daños por tabaco,
Yet you're a doctor who works in tobacco harm reduction. You ask to be listened to. And due to simple fact that you support tobacco harm reduction, you're paid by tobacco companies? That's not true. Never. What's a conflict of interest?
Las revistas, o sea, hay que ver
En-
cómo lo definen también. Yo, por
We have to
ejemplo,
see
tengo
how
un
it's defined
artículo
in
de
magazines too.
Sussman ahí que incluso
I once had
rechazándome el
a
artículo,
huge problem,
porque
and my article ended up being
o sea,
rejected.
vayan a cualquier revista médica. En la física
Go to
no,
any
física no. Revista
medicine
médica
magazine
con salud, y
that is to do with health,
dicen conflicto financiero.
and you'll see them talk about the financial conflicts and ideological conflicts, which is not properly defined and it's questionable. Let's say I'm a Catholic and I'm going to talk about the reproductive system and the biology. The Vatican doesn't pay me, I'm simply a Catholic, and I have certain ideas that come from Catholicism. Will I be undermined due to the fact that I go to Mass every weekend? Does that mean I can't talk about human reproduction?
¿no? Por eso es importante, ya hay definiciones, pero las
That's
revistas
why
médicas
definitions are
les pido que
important.
hagan ese ejercicio. Entren a la revista médica,
But I'd love for you all to go into
lean los requisitos para los actores,
into different magazines and read about conflicts of interest and read their definitions. It's abuse. Their definition of it is abusive, and we have to fight it. I own my own ideology, and if my way of thinking is to support harm reduction, it's not actually a conflict.
puede definirse.
Te tengo
O sea,
que cortar, Roberto, lo siento. Que nos quedan 10
pero
minutitos.
yo quería transmitir la idea. Hagan ese ejercicio, se los recomiendo.
Nos quedan 10 minutitos. Tengo por aquí una pregunta del chat, creo. ¿Cómo se podría abordar la oposición de las organizaciones de salud pública y de los colectivos médicos que puedan argumentar que los productos de vapeo más accesibles podrían conducir a un aumento de la adicción o de la dependencia de la nicotina, generando posibles riesgos para la salud? A ver, ¿habéis entendido? Un momentito. ¿Sí?
Sí.
Vale, pues adelante.
Sí, la pregunta es buena y válida y la respuesta es regulación. Es que una vez más, si es que no existe aceptación, no existe regulación, y si no existe regulación, existe abuso y mal uso. Entonces, lo que nosotros tenemos que estar claros es del posicionamiento adecuado. Por eso, la exigencia a los diferentes gobiernos es que se regularice el proceso, que no se penalice el proceso. Si es que nosotros tenemos esto como una herramienta para la cesación, para ayudar a dejar de fumar, no puede estar penalizado con una mayor tasa de impuestos y hacerle inasequible, porque entonces se vuelve un lujo. Tampoco puede estar de venta libre sin que exista ningún tipo de control, porque entonces lleva a una sobrecomercialización, a un sobreuso. No hay que tener temor, porque obviamente mientras la ley sea y se cumpla, el control debería estar a cargo del proceso.
Y si queréis alguna pregunta del público, que Gina se me ha ido y me había dicho que quería hacer una pregunta, pero bueno. ¿Eh? Pues empezad, cualquiera.
Ahí te retiro mis cosas. Como profesionales de la salud iberoamericanos, ¿no? Tenemos, creo que desde Argentina hasta España, hay un amplio espectro cultural y social y regulatorio también, y una vasta experiencia. ¿Qué visión tienen, ¿no?, sobre la posición de las opciones que nos dejan a determinados países, ¿no? Porque, por ejemplo, Suecia, Inglaterra, Nueva Zelanda, bueno, España con sus altibajos a nivel regulatorios, tienen la opción de la reducción de daños, optar por ella, ¿no? Con sus desventuras y matices. Pero para países latinoamericanos como Argentina, Brasil, México, que bueno, son los países más prohibitivos, nos dejan solamente esa opción. O sea, y yo no creo que el contraste sea porque hay países desarrollados o menos desarrollados. Entonces, ¿por qué la diferencia? Entonces, para algunos países sí existe la opción de la regulación y la reducción de daños, y para otros países la única opción es la prohibición, como diciendo, no están preparados todavía. O esa es la impresión que nos deja a los latinoamericanos y sobre todo los que padecemos tan estrictamente, ¿no?
Creo que este tipo de actividades y lo que hemos hecho por bastante tiempo ayuda muchísimo para compartir ideas y poder ver qué se hace en otras latitudes, que nos ayuda mucho. Personalmente, el proyecto de ley que pueden tener acceso, pues es público, ¿verdad? El que hicimos ahora con lo de la ley esta, tiene cosas muy positivas, que si nosotros lo pudiéramos mejorar, porque queremos filtrarlo, ¿verdad? Eso, transmitirlo a los demás países, y algo que siempre hemos hablado el doctor Terán y yo, y bueno, y el doctor Verrastro, hagamos nuestra propia estadística, hagamos nuestros propios estudios. Si nosotros podemos aplicar un método o una legislación contrastado o lo apoyamos con estudios locales de nosotros, o sea, sí, esta ley se aprobó y logramos el impacto en esto, punto. Y el vecino lo va a ver. Entonces, ¿qué es lo que ocupamos? Seguir trabajando bajo la línea que vamos. Hagamos nuestros propios estudios, nuestra propia casuística tengamos y tratemos de plasmarla, porque no hay… yo siempre pongo el ejemplo que…
We should make our own studies and try to implement them. Kids used to be measured with the growth measurements done by Germans because we didn't have those numbers for ourselves. When did this improve? When we started measuring, having our own measurements. That's when we started growing. And to complete what you said, I believe that I know where your question is coming from, Juan. And it's that until the politicians that we vote, who have the power to make decisions in the Senate, focus on harm reduction, we won't advance. England managed it because the politicians understood what harm reduction meant and acted based on it. In Latin America, we don't have those politicians yet with an open mind, who don't think about political advantages, and until we have these kinds of politicians, we'll still be able to present ourselves and be activists and that, but we need the politicians for this to become a reality regarding public health. 53 years have gone by since the start of the battle against drugs. People with post-traumatic stress disorder have been damaged. And you talked about LSD with them previously. We're seeing depression in people. And it's one of the sectors that's most affected by this, and they would benefit a lot if studies with nicotine had received more attention. How do doctors treat this pragmatism regarding the investigation with these issues? It's a paradox, and it's tough to analyze it. The father of evidence-based medicine said that in 10 years, most of the things we know today will be false. The issue is, what half of these issues will be false? Which half of it? Now the World Health Organization talks about sweeteners that are the biggest evil, yet 10 years ago they were pro this and against sugar. So it's about anticipating. It's not prudent. We have to advance slowly. And that's what happens with nicotine. There was a myth against nicotine, and now there's scientific evidence that it works, that it has some positive effects. There's a huge number of studies on this. Well, unfortunately, we don't have enough time. I would stay here all afternoon. But I'd like to close down with 3 issues. To answer our question, is it not a moral and ethical obligation for health professionals to promote harm reduction? Yes, I believe that we should defend what you've studied, not what you've been told to say. It's what you've sworn by. It's a moral responsibility to not block the debate. It should arise naturally We should promote an ethical behavior throughout the sector. Some academics want to debate, and the other have are terrified of debating. So they use this conflict of interest issue to not even have to debate about this. Countries such as Spain, and it happens a lot. We don't even debate. And the final conclusion is, what are you afraid of? You're scientists. You've been educated to sit down and debate on science. What are you afraid of? And it's a shame, because it ends up affecting people's lives, because science doesn't develop properly. It ends up affecting society, and people end up dying. And it's a true shame. Thanks a lot to everyone.